So Rafi and the girls and I were standing at the Iceland airport this summer. It was a bucket list trip that we'd been wanting to take for many years. And we flew through the night. We arrived in Iceland's airport early morning to join hundreds of other people who were waiting to clear customs. Everyone was polite, they were tired, and they were relatively lovely as we circled our way through the room. And it was then that my daughter Noah leaned into me, and in a voice that was not a whisper, she said, "What percentage of these people do you think hate us?" I nearly laughed because the question really did catch me off guard. But she's a strong girl and she seemed to want to go there. And so I responded as a mother, resisting my urge to answer based on the latest data that I knew, which was not pretty. And I said to her, "Honey, they wouldn't hate us if they knew us." And she said, "I agree, but they don't. And so they do." Again, she said it quite matter-of-factly. "What percentage?" she asked. "Oh no," I said, "I don't know. What do you think?" "About 90%, she said. "Hate us?" I asked. "Yep," she said. "Do you care?" I asked her. Truly curious. "Nope," she said. "Not at all." And I believed her. I don't know exactly what enables Noah to live with this sort of strength. I've thought about it often since. There was a time when she was in middle school when she decided that she wanted to go to church. And I remember the day like it was yesterday. She got all dressed up in her Sunday finest. And when she got home, she shared that the pastor's sermon was about how not everyone has to like you. And that's okay. It resonated deeply with her, even though she was just 13 years old at the time. And she's curious, and she has this remarkable way of not personalizing things, which I think helps her these days. But she's also really courageous and unstoppable when it comes to learning the facts. She's taken many deep dives into Judaism and Israel, and she knows enough not to panic based on the headlines or the reels that are coming across her social media feeds. She knows what's true and she knows what isn't. And when she isn't sure, she does real research until she finds real data and real facts. And I think that these are some of the keys to thriving nowadays. To be curious about others' ideas and feelings, to not take things too personally. And lastly, to know enough that we can be confident about who we are, why we do the things we do, and what's really going on in this crazy world around us. And of course, it doesn't hurt to recognize that not everyone's going to like us, and to know that that's okay. Perhaps I should have preached this message earlier, but truth be told, like some of you, I actually really did not feel disliked before. For those of us who are blessed to grow up in beautiful bubbles such as ours, many of us had not before experienced a world in which Jews were disliked or vilified. My father, he had his stories, as many of you do. He told us one particular story about a time in basic training when the captain called him out. Well, he actually called out for all the effing Jews to come forward. And not a single person stepped forward of the 600 people in the lineup, even though there were some Jews among them. My father did. He walked up to the front of the line that day, and he punched the guy out. Dad would proudly say that he was the lowest ranking serviceman to ever be sent to Vietnam. But many of you have stories like those. They used to feel like a thing of the past until October 7th. And more eye-opening, perhaps, even than the massacre, was the response. Because it was then that we began to see what we hadn't been paying attention to for decades. Festering hate, conspiracy theories, and a unilaterally focused campaign to bring down the Jewish people and the Jewish homeland. Most of us were blindsided. We were blindsided to the ideology that set this mindset in motion. But Natan Sharansky, he wasn't. Sharansky, many of you know, he was a progressive activist who grew up in the Soviet Union, and he fought for Soviet Jews and he fought for human rights. He also spent 13 years in solitary confinement in the Soviet Union for taking on those battles. In 2022, he wrote a piece that should have set off warning bells, but it didn't because it felt so outrageous at the time. It was long before most of us were paying attention to what was happening on our college campuses and beyond. Sharansky wrote in 2022, growing up in the Soviet Union, there was an ideology that we had to learn in grade school and in the university, and we were forced to repeat it at every opportunity. The ideology stated that the entire history of the world is a fight between the privileged and unprivileged, between those who have and those who have not. The ideology held that people of goodwill must join in a fight by the proletariat against the capitalists, and that the proletariat must always fight because they are always the victims. The ideology held that capitalists should be deprived of their right to speak because when they speak, they merely justify thousands of years of exploitation. This, he said, was the ideology that was used as a pretext to kill tens of millions of people for belonging to the wrong class, the wrong nation, or having the wrong political views. Many Jews were among them. In the beginning, Sharansky said, many Jews were inspired by the progressive dream about the world of equals, and they joined the revolution. But in the end, this ideology was weaponized specifically against Jews. Ultimately, what Sharansky says is that the role of the Jew is not to join forces with the ideological fads of that day, but to stand up for independent thought and the principles on which the democracies of the world were founded. It's not only from the left that we're seeing anti-Semitism. Conspiracy theories abound on the far right. From Candace Owens to Tucker Carlson, the accusations, the vitriol, the conspiracy theories are constant and they are dangerous. As David Bernstein, the former director of the Jewish Council of Public Affairs, pointed out, there's anti-Semitism coming from the left and from the right. From the right, he said, it's like a heart attack. It's sudden and violent. But from the left, it's like a cancer. It's insidious, institutional, and long-term. Neither is good. Ahad Ha'am, a leading 20th century Zionist thinker, coined a term called general agreement. And he said it's when a society engages in a general agreement on the evil qualities and deeds of the Jews. This powerful mechanism of instilling doubt leads Jews to wonder, could the whole world be wrong? It's hard not to feel an occasional sense of doubt when the masses are saying one thing and we are seemingly alone saying another. And after reading the New York Times and the Washington Post and watching the news every single day, you almost can't help but think, maybe we're the crazy ones every once in a while. Many Jews in the entertainment industry have signed on to petitions lately that undermine the Jews in the Jewish homeland. Many Jews in progressive circles have had to make hard choices in order to fit in. And many of our 20-somethings on campuses have paid the price for standing apart. To try to stay out of the fray, some Jews have opted to keep their heads down, pretending not to hear the comment made by a colleague, not to see the problematic post of a friend, trying to make sure that people know that they too are compassionate toward the plight of the Palestinians. And the hope is that if we can do these things, they won't be noticed or shunned, and that sometime soon this craziness will pass. And I wish that it would. But appeasement in the long term has rarely, if ever, turned out to be an effective strategy for the Jews. Throughout history, we have been asked to denounce our Judaism and to denounce our homeland, or to make changes to our Jewish identities in exchange for the privilege of belonging. For the sake of jobs, careers, acceptances into universities, memberships at country clubs, for the promise of acceptance and safety. Many Jews have tried. They've changed their noses, they've changed their names, they've changed the way they dress, and now we're being told, actually, it's just Israel that's the problem. If you just denounce Israel, you will still have a place among us. But don't be fooled. Anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism are inextricably linked, and the strategy of demanding that Jews erase or change a piece of our identities in order to belong or appease is a pattern that has never and will never work for us. And I don't think that we can expect others to stand for us or with us if we aren't standing up strong for ourselves. The Western world wants us to be nice, but the Middle East responds better to strength. And that is the ongoing conflict for Israel and for the Jewish people. People are not comfortable with Jews with power. The non-Jewish world isn't, and I think that Jews struggle with this too. We might agree and we might not agree with the government actions and policies these days. The strategies around the war and our hostages are complicated. But as Americans, plenty of us disagree with our president at any given time. And that doesn't mean that we stop loving or fighting for our country. We cannot apologize for protecting our people and our homeland. As Golda Meir once so brilliantly said, I would prefer to live and have bad press than to be dead and have a beautiful eulogy. I think that's true for all of us. These past 2 years, we have seen that even surrounded by enemies whose mission it is to destroy us, Israel still feels like the safest haven for the Jewish people. So how do we live in this crazy world? I have some options. 1, we need to get educated. This past year, Haviv Redding Gore, the author and senior analyst at the Times of Israel, he spent time touring American campuses, and he told a story about a kid who came up to him on one of those campuses, and he shared that he avoided certain areas on the campus because every time he walked by, there were kids that hollered out, Zionism is colonialism. And Haviv looked at him and he said, that's impossible. Do you want to know why? And that he shared, because the Jewish people are refugees, because we have no other country, because we have no mother country, because there's no other place that we belong and there is no other place that we can go, and therefore we cannot actually be colonists. On another campus, a different student approached him, and he said, here people say that there should never have been a Jewish state and that it should never have been created. And Haviv responded again with ease. He said, you know that all the other Jews in Europe are dead, right? So Jews are either speaking Hebrew or they're speaking English, or they're buried. After spending time with Jews on 100 college campuses, Haviv pointed out that there is a war on our story these days, that people and countries and governments are trying to rewrite our story and trying to erase us. And the biggest problem is that Jews don't know our story well enough to feel comfortable responding. For Jews in America, being a Zionist is optional these days. But for our ancestors, Zionism was not an option. 500,000 people went to Israel, but the other millions were Zionists because they didn't have another choice. Theirs was a Zionism of rescue. When the rest of the world was either killing our ancestors or refusing to save them, the only answer was to return to our ancient homeland of Israel. We need to learn more about our history. And we also need to learn more about the story of these days as well. Not the stories that others write for us or try to rewrite, but our story. We need to make sure that we're hearing about what's happening in Israel from our sources. We need to be learning about Jewish heroes, not only of the past, but also the heroes of today. This summer, my son Gideon worked at a Camp Mosheva in the Poconos. And he came home with a deck of cards that looked like playing cards, but they actually weren't. They were hero cards. And each card had a different Israeli hero's story. Included in that deck were the stories of Honor Shapiro and Hirsch Goldberg Polin and Rose Lublin. And these kids at camp, they learned those stories. And our kids can too. It's a new year. We can jump in. Because it's when we know our history and when we know our story that we will be more comfortable and confident in dialogues and conversations with both the lovers and the haters. Option 2, go full Jew. It was Jonah Platt who suggested this on his podcast, an incredible podcast. And he said, go full Jew. And what he meant is be proud of your Judaism. Incorporate it into your life. Do Jewish, and do Jewish beyond what you may have done before and beyond what's even comfortable for you. Be what you might have previously considered to be too Jewy, and do it with pride. Going full Jew can be scary when the world is looking and judging. It can be even scarier when Jews around the world feel unsafe and vulnerable. I get it. On that very same Iceland trip, my husband, Rafi, decided to wear his favorite t-shirt with a big Israeli flag on it to a crowded lunch place near the iceberg. It was all going fine until a 6'3" man who was wearing shaded glasses from Morocco approached us. Can I ask you a question? He asked. I held my breath, and so did the girls. And thankfully, all he wanted to know was where we bought the pizza. But he and his wife ended up sitting down with us and talking. And yes, we spoke about Israel, and we also spoke about Gaza, and we are here to show it. It is so much easier to take off the t-shirts and the kippot, to tuck in our bring them home necklaces and our Jewish stars and the things that identify us as Jews these days. But it is also an option to just go full on Jew, to embrace it, to love it, to rejoice in our traditions and our people and our heritage, and to make our Jewish identity worth fighting for. This August, I dropped 2 of our kids off at college. I saw so many kids that were opting to go full Jew. My son's community spends more time living with Jewish joy than they do worrying about anti-Semitism. And when I say joy, I mean joy. It sometimes feels like they're high on Judaism. They're dancing and singing and learning and hosting Shabbos meals, celebrating with a contagious passion. And he and his friends constantly remind me of what it is we're fighting for. At my daughter's college, there are tons of kids that are also going full Jew. I walked into a dorm room decorated with black and white pictures of David Ben-Gurion and Israel's pioneers. Kids are bringing their Jewish and their non-Jewish friends for Shabbat meals at Hillel and Chabad. Kids have decided not to apologize and not to get quiet about loving Israel or Judaism in order to make other people feel comfortable or to fit in. Our kids are so brave. And I know that because I see them with their Jewish star necklaces, and they amaze me. We've had kids from this congregation that have made Aliyah, that have moved to Israel this year. We've had countless kids that have visited Israel on birthright trips and with their colleges. And so many of our congregational kids are more engaged and invested in their Judaism than they've ever been. They're more curious than they've ever been, and they're more courageous than they've ever had to be. They have pushed themselves to learn more than they have ever needed to know. And they all make me so proud. It is our collective children and grandchildren that truly give me hope. 3, be an ambassador. Queen Esther lived in days such as these. The king, second in command, Haman, had unlimited power and access to the king, and he had it out for the Jews. Sound familiar? He had a strategy which was to exterminate and eliminate the Jewish people. And the Jews were seriously outnumbered, and they needed to thwart their enemy's plan. And you know the rest of the story. Mordecai turns to Esther and asks her to go to her husband, the king, and to tell him about Haman's plans of genocide for the Jews. And she was reluctant. I imagine she was concerned about herself and her safety and her standing, her own well-being and her relationships. But Mordecai wouldn't take no for an answer. To her reluctance, he responded, Esther, if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will come for the Jews from another place. But you and your family will perish. Esther was not comfortable with the role of ambassador that she was being asked to play, but she also understood that she needed to be an ambassador for her people. Our people needed her. It is hard to be an ambassador. It was hard for Esther, and it can be hard for us. The Anti-Defamation League has invested a lot of resources to figure out how we can talk to others about Israel and about Judaism. They've used research teams from all over the world, and they concluded these things. They came to conclude that the word anti-Semitism confuses people, that the definition of Zionism is also confusing to people, and that people trust influencers more than experts, that they trust feelings more than facts, and that personal stories are the only things that move hearts and change minds. Tova Hellerstein, an educator and expert in Jewish identity, posits that regardless of how it feels or seems, most people are not pro-Zionist or anti-Zionist. It's not really a binary. Most people, she says, don't know anything about the Middle East or Israel or Gaza except the images that they see on TV and social media and the snippets they read on TikTok or the New York Times. They're just figuring it out. And so we need to be ambassadors, even when we're operating from a place of threat or fear. I was recently approached by a quiet couple who were friends of friends. They knew I was a rabbi, and they pulled me aside after dinner, and they shared with me that they were praying for us and for Israel. Our whole church is, they said. We can't allow ourselves to believe that we are all alone. We certainly are not winning any popularity contests these days, but we also are not alone. So 4, be a connector. It's easy in times like these to circle the wagons and surround ourselves with Jews who get it, Jews who understand us and share our views, who understand this moment in time in the same way that we do. But right now, for those of us who are connectors, this is an important time to reach out and make some friends, to share Shabbat with non-Jews, to talk about our people's story with the people who sit down next to us at a restaurant, who ask about our bringing them home tags or yellow ribbons. This is a time to try out telling the story of our people and why we need an Israel, to share what's beautiful about our Jewish traditions, because most people have no idea who we are and what we're about. Tell them, and tell them with wholeheartedness. So to our incredible community of Jews, let us use these holy days to take a beat, to reflect on all that we've endured from 2 years in the spotlight, to show ourselves some grace, and to figure out our role and our purpose in this amazing time in our people's story. I was a student in rabbinical school. Our school was across the street from Columbia University, and the president of Iran, Ahmadinejad, was invited to campus to speak. It seemed like every Jewish student on campus showed up that night to protest outside the venue. But a few days later, it was Simchat Torah. And at Hillel, they barely had a minyan. One of the students that showed up that night decided to put letters in all of the Jewish kids' mailboxes. And the letter said something like this: when it came to fighting anti-Semitism, you all showed up en masse. But when it came time to rejoice in the Judaism that you fought to protect, almost no one came. This moment in time is precious. Our community is awake, we're activated, we care, we're inspired, so let us not worry about being liked. And let us not worry about being pleasing. Let's use our energy not only to fight the Jewish haters and hate, but to embrace the incredible Jewish life that we've been gifted, to make sure that we know who we are, where we came from, where we're going, and the why of what we're fighting for. Bret Stephens was a columnist for the New York Times, and he shared with me a story. His mother was a Holocaust survivor, and one day she was watching a video. It was a drone that had caught a group of students surrounding a Jewish students on Harvard's campus. She was concerned by what she saw, and she wasn't sure what to do. And so when her son Bret came over to visit, she told him the story, and she ended with these chilling words. She said, "Bret, I was born in hiding, and I don't want to die in hiding. He understood. And the very next day, Brett showed up and he gave his mom an Israeli flag, and they hung it from her front door. She would not die hiding her Jewish identity, and neither will we. Shana Tova.